Um, the background, the draft proposal, the different scenarios that architects may encounter in this proposal. So to introduce the project, it is the Conservation and Natural Resources Element Update Project. And as a part of that project, there are 4 different components, 2 of which are essentially policy components that are a part of our general plan. That document essentially establishes the bigger vision, policies, goals, and direction for the county. And then there's a secondary component, which is a zoning code component of that, which tells the instructions, the what, and the how when projects come through for permitting processes. So we're going to focus specifically on the significant ecological area project component of this 4-prong update. And we do have I'm going to be starting on slide 3 here to issue projects. So this project is initiated in response to state legislation that has previously been adopted. Those 2 pieces of legislation are Senate Bill 1425 and Assembly Bill 1889. Combined, those 2 pieces of legislation essentially have us looking at the biodiversity of the region and how development impacts biodiversity. The significant ecological areas is and contains and represents the biological diversity of the county and constitutes habitats of the region that can be sustained into the future. Thank you, ma'am. Happy to address your points shortly. The SCA program, as I mentioned at the top of this, is consisting of 2 components. That is the policy aspect as well as the zoning aspect of it as well. In terms of the background of the program as a whole, the program has been around for the last 50 years, since 1976. It's gone through a number of iterations of studies. Approximately every 25 years, we conducted a study to understand how ecological function has been performing in the county. And now on slide 7. So a large component of this and what starts the conversation is how the mapping was conducted. How do we draw those boundaries? How do we apply it to communities? There are a set of SCA selection criteria in which this mapping
period, hopefully.
occurs. And there are
I'll be on in a minute.
SCA criteria that are included in this process, 6 of which have been existing since 1976. The 7th one we did add in order to address AB 1889, which focuses on that habitat continuity segment. So what we're here to talk about tonight, in terms of questions about, is the draft proposal. And I do want to highlight that at this stage, it is a draft for community conversation and feedback. It is not an imposition of regulations that have been adopted. They have not yet been adopted. It is a proposal. On slide 9, what to expect with a map that you may have already seen. The proposed SCA boundaries are based on the data that meet the selection criteria that I described and that are in the aforementioned slides. The expansion we would include proposals in both the unincorporated area as well as the cities to indicate that connectivity aspects and that our biology doesn't necessarily stop at a visible jurisdictional line. At this point, there are no proposed reductions in the existing SCA, and the SCA program is already existing. So it is in place. There are portions of the county that have this designation already. And in this 2025-26 process, there is an expansion of those areas that are being proposed. A large component of that mapping is the extension into the national forest. As many of you probably recreate in the national forest, you observe that there are a lot of resources in that area, though they are different in the type of species that you might encounter, given that they're at a higher elevation. They are and finally, on those proposed boundaries, we talked about the larger subdivision projects and the effects and conclusions there. On that next slide, on slide 10, you'll see an image of that map application that is available on our website for viewing. You can enter in an address or an accessory parcel number. It'll then zoom into the parcel or property that you put in, and highlight whether or not it's in a proposed area, in an existing area, or not in one at all. And there's a legend to indicate what the colors mean. If you click on the parcel itself, it will then on the right-hand side scroll to the information that is specific to that area. And on the left-hand side, you can use the app to contact us with your comments if you still have any. It's one of many means to get in touch with us. I'm going to go through some of the scenarios that landowners and property owners may encounter with this proposal. So I am now on slide 12. In a scenario where there are property owners who have vacant parcels and that there's no development proposed, what you would encounter is that vegetation removal that is not associated with defensible space needs to remain in place. Again, emphasizing if you need to do defensible space, that is the priority. Fines should be done in accordance to that requirement from the fire department. Any sort of grading of undisturbed areas that contain native vegetation, again, should be left alone unless it's in association with development that you are proposing. Exploratory wells would be subject to this ordinance. Temporary uses that are going to propose removing native vegetation or building permanent structures would be subject to this ordinance. Farming and mulch and grade waste sites are also subject to this, given that those mulch sites that you've observed often covers the entirety of the properties and can be significant depth. A lot of properties may fall under the next scenario, under slide 13, which is an existing developed property. They're looking to maintain the property, not necessarily expand development on it. Under that scenario, again, defensible space does not require any sort of additional permit from us. You don't need to come in, you just need to comply with that notice that we received from the fire department. If you receive a notice from the agricultural basin commissioner for annual weed abatement and brush clearance, again, that falls into the same bucket as the fire department. Please comply with that. That does not require from us. Any sort of driveway and private road maintenance of existing roads that are associated with your permitted development, that doesn't require additional permitting as well too. We've had questions additionally at other meetings about, well, what if my road gets washed out? Does that mean I can't resurface it or can't recompact it? That's not the case. You can. And then emergency tree removals within windy conditions in the Antelope Valley. You know that sometimes trees fall over, portions of trees to break off as well too. If it is posing a hazard, they want to remove that, but they may be subject to other permits through the county or the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. It's a protected tree. So right now, for example, in other parts of the county, the forestry unit actually has to issue an emergency permit for oak tree removals. We don't see a lot of oaks in the desert itself. I just wanted to point that out. But Joshua trees certainly are prevalent in the desert here. That is protected by California Department of Fish and Wildlife. They actually have to issue a permit in order for that to occur. And again, if it is an emergency situation, they have a streamlined process for that. So it's a relatively easy process. You just need to tell them. They'll ask you for photos and specific information, and they'll issue that permit. Tree maintenance and tree pruning, removing of non-native trees, and like-for-like replacements, again, all do not require additional permit from us. So, you know, if you have a pepper tree that was growing for a while, you don't like it, it's an issue, get rid of it. Just get rid of it, it's okay. And then like-for-like replacements, again, it's already, and just replace it, it's not have, it's worn out, there's a hole in it, replace it where it is, unless you're going to be moving it entirely in a different location. On slide 14, this is just reiterating that there's 4 defensible space. It shows that defensible space area and zones, so please do move forward with that when you're seeing this. On slide 15, This is another scenario of vacant parcels that is being proposed for new development or new construction. Under this scenario, there are two different permitting pathways. Generally, the permitting pathway is the same as what we do now. Is either what we call a ministerial route or a discretionary route. With the ministerial route, it means that we don't have to go through a public hearing process. A discretionary process means that we do. The difference, however, with the SCA ordinance proposal is that there are more development standards that need to be adhered to, but also it does require a pre-application counseling for the development to ensure that there is a removal of sensitive resources. And we can also help you identify what may already be protected by other agencies and help to avoid it so that you can reduce those potential costs if you're able to. The discretionary process is longer, it is a little more involved, and it does require a higher permit cost and a public hearing process. So instead of kind of the over-the-counter process, we submit the application, the plans, we review it, we check off all of the boxes, and then if it meets everything, we can go ahead and issue the permit. Instead, the discretionary process would require that same process happens. However, we have to initiate a public hearing and a decision by the decision body would have to be rendered. So that is the discretionary process. For existing developments, moving on to the next scenario on slide 16, for existing developments, so built with a house or any other permitted structures, if they're going to be new additions or modifications. The highlighted portion here indicates that the SCA ordinance does not apply retroactively. So again, whether it's an existing property and they're only maintaining or doing modifications, additions, it doesn't retroactively apply to the entirety of the property. It applies to the new portion of the proposal. There are exemptions, however, with those existing developments where you're looking to add or modify. So if you are able to meet certain development standards, such as keeping that building site area under 15,000 square feet and not encroaching into more than 4 protected trees, then it is exempted entirely. So it's essentially saying that the addition or the modification is so minor, you really don't need to come to us for that additional process. It would be the regular process that you would go through for that addition or modification. However, if it exceeds those thresholds or you can't meet those development standards, it would go through that discretionary process that I described. On slide 17, it gives just a generic example of what that building site area covers. And so what cumulatively adds up to the 15,000 square foot proposal? It includes a building pad, graded slopes, structures, decks, impervious surfaces, and ornamental landscape areas. However, the first 300 feet of a driveway is excluded. Any sort of required turnaround safety areas that are required by the fire department are excluded from that calculation, as well as a field modification area that's associated with defensible space is excluded. So it really narrows down what that building site area is, what cumulatively adds up to the building site area. The potential standards that may apply are related to fencing. So we just mentioned that whether it's existing fencing you're just replacing, you would be exempt altogether. But if it's a wholly new fence, there are some standards that would apply there. There is a development standard of not planting invasive plants in the landscape area. And also outdoor shielding with outdoor lighting. And I'm going to touch upon some of these where it does align with the Pearblossom CST. Also, there's another standard that may apply of non-reflective windows in order to minimize and prevent burn strikes. And with that, that takes me to the end of that presentation. Happy to talk about kind of what the input may be from the Pearblossom community, the thoughts, some suggestions on both the ordinance itself, how it would apply, and further engage in that.
before I open it up to everyone, I'd like to just say a few things. Thank you for taking the time to come out here. I know it's not an easy trip to come on out. I don't think you live out. You're probably in LA, I would assume, somewhere.
I'm always happy to be here, regardless of the distance.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for your commitment. We do appreciate that. A lot of people that are not only here, but within the community are gravely concerned. My community specifically, we're probably one of the most underserved in all of LA County. And some of these SEAs are going to make it even harder to build through some of the permit processes. So it's like we're developing an ordinance that's already shooting people in the foot to build their houses. A lot of people have bought land. Now they're being encompassed in this area. So I think the fees, like if you're going to have an SEA, we've had them, the fees should reflect the community. If we're going to have this, it should reflect the people or the community. I can't afford to do anything. And if you look out here in all this desert, no one else can either. And guess what? Enforcement don't do nothing. So you guys are making all these rules, more red tape. So anyone who has money has to pay these fees. And anyone who doesn't have money, well, they just slip under the table. They have to wait a while. They get in trouble. They dance for a couple of groups. And so it's really hard. And I was going through this ordinance. It's a lot to go through. There's a lot of verbiage in there that doesn't even reflect our normal tongue. How we talk as just regular people. And I know there's a lot of experts that put all their and legal terminology and all that good stuff in there. But a concern that I found was during the TAC, the Technical Advisory Committee, I forget the exact term, it's called TAC, and it's in there. You guys had an expert from every field, but you didn't have one local resident.
Yeah.
Not one. So automatically for me, and I don't know about anyone else, your data is skewed. You didn't have any community, local experts, none. And I think that's the fault of the company that you all hired. The second thing that was concerning is when you guys started creating exclusions, you removed the AV area plan. That was designed by us. That was hundreds and hundreds of hours of input, just like our CSD. Ag exempt is removed. People are moving here because they're tired of the city. Now, we can't have full-blown Scatiglia style farms anymore. We don't have the water for it, but we want to farm our land. Every single bit of my land, and I'm not in the SCA, but it concerns me because I have lots of family and friends. With the way grocery prices are and the way that things cost, our livestock, our chicken, more and more of this is coming. We're sick of the urban mentality. It really hampers down on us. People got their chickens, their cows, their goats. We have all kinds of fruit trees because it does freeze here, so we can get stoned. By grading onto a plat, you're taking that away from us. And this area was always known as the fruit basket of the Antelope Valley. So it's concerning that ag exempt was removed. Well, that explains this map. That's almost all ag land minus this bottom forest section here. My next concern is, and I encourage everyone here to challenge the data, because I looked at the data. There's nothing that says, I'll just say it, at the outpost, there's this animal, this tree, and it met these 4 out of the 5 requirements to make this an SEA. There's no information about it. The only information I did find that came from the company that did this research of, and I hopefully you didn't pay them that much because their research was pretty skewed to maybe just only an environmentalist point of view, not to reality of how humans live. So I think we should revisit, and I'm gonna encourage everyone, the data needs to be revisited. You looked at these guys. I'm trying to slow down. Sorry, I had so much information. The data that they went over was from what, the 70s, you're saying, the 2000s, all these different, they went over all of that and they accumulated that to help them find these areas. So then they went out to do field visits because they are saying field visits are necessary when they can't use electronic maps. Well, I don't care what anyone says, you'll never be able to get a study off of an electronic map. Okay, so let's say that they went out for the field visit. Their field visit started in a car on that side of the Antelope Valley, and they talk about how they drove in a circle towards Acton. That was their field visit. That was their report. Nothing about horny toads, nothing about a special tree, nothing about anything that we were told at the Juniper Hills meeting. There was 4 out of 5 requirements, the whole Antelope Valley. Well, for my town, and I encourage this for everyone else's town, if there's going to be an SEA that's going to be added into my area, and you say there's 4 out of 5 items that the state says this meets the requirements, and there's no on-site data, there's no one from that organization came and talked to anybody here, nobody out there. That's a one-sided point of view study, period. And what I'm going to ask personally, and I hope everyone else, I know a lot of people, is that you rescind this and you guys start over. And we're going to have to start over because the study is not a study. I challenge it. If you took that to any college, Berkeley, anywhere, they would laugh at that study. They would laugh at it. I really, truly believe that. I'm laughing at it, and I never even went there because I can't find any information about why the outpost was added to it, why 136th Street was added to it, why Juniper Hills, Pearblossom side, Little Rock side was all added to it. I can't find that. You guys believe in full-heartedness or whatever your boss tells you. I understand. This isn't you, but you work for a department. What we're asking you is when you go back to the team, you're like, our data is flawed. I had no points of data to share with them about 131st or about the outpost. I couldn't tell them out of the 4 or 5 points that make it an SEA because we haven't heard that, can't find it. So if you guys could provide that information, maybe even have these researchers come out and explain to the community how their drive justifies, and looking at 20-plus-year-old data justifies them circling in my community. They said there was things like added butterflies and all these animals and these trees. I don't know about you, but if you're driving in a car, only butterflies I see are splattered on my windshield. So I've been getting nothing but tons of phone calls and texts about this. And people are very upset because the presentation of this data that was collected is flawed. It doesn't serve our community one bit. And all you're presenting is fees, more fees. Oh, we're going to micromanage these trees. We're going to micromanage that. That's all we hear. Now, do you live in the city or do you live in a rural area? That's my next question to you.
I don't know that that's relevant to this specific project.
Well, I think it is, and I'm going to share you something about rural culture. We all do our own stuff. So, for example, if Jackie needs some help with her plumbing, she's an expert at other things. We go over there and help her. A tree needs cut down, we got chainsaws. Some dirt needs plowed, we got tractors. We're self-sufficient culture. So if you lived in a rural area, I think you would know that. And I'm hoping that we can teach the county that our rural communities are a little different. They're a lot different. So,
Which were the purpose of the CSTs.
yeah, and we put all that hard work in our CSDs. And it reflects it, and it was our local community decision, not a blanket for the whole AV. From Juniper Hills to here to Lake LA, we're all very different.
And
This
I'm glad that-
completely ignores our CSTs. It ignores years, decades that we all put into letting the county know specifically what we want in our rural field. You guys can really just act as if none of that exists.
Oh, and the county approved it.
So I'm just trying to get you to understand the culture. And the reason why I asked you, and I'm not asking you what city you live in or what street. What I'm asking is, when we sit down and we break bread with our neighbors. I know you work at the JPL, I know you work at the construction spot, we all share it. And the thing is we get to know each other. That's how trust is built in small towns. And that's why I ask you, it has nothing to do with trying to anything negative. It has to do with understanding who we're talking to.
And so Chris, I
Sense of community.
Yeah,
appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. And with all due respect, yeah, I don't live in Pearblossom. I don't live in the Antelope Valley. But I hope that you understand it doesn't completely negate the decades that I have spent in the Antelope Valley. And Jackie can attest to how far back we have worked together. And how many summers I've been out here. And again, I'm not gonna say that that's at any level of expertise of anybody who's sitting in this room. It is not. However, it doesn't mean that we are completely absent of knowledge or the information that we have received from community members over the years. I was a part of the Antelope Valley Area Plan Development and some team initiated it. So I do respect it and I do respect the rural culture, the rural environment. But again, that's why we're having this conversation. And as a part of these processes, we don't come and just say, well, this is it, folks, you know, there's no engagement, no conversation. We're just.
I'll interrupt you real quick. You can say that. And I'll give it to the county for the last 5 years. They've tried way harder to engage with the community. But when I first joined the council, 8, 9, 10 years ago with Little Rock, it wasn't like that. And a lot of the people sitting in this room and a lot of people in my community, they've been stepped on by this county so many times. So I'd like you to understand that. So when you talk to us, you could see some of our frustration and underserved, stepped on, never heard, last to receive any type of equitable anything. Yeah, we're just classically Hicks and the sticks, and you know what, I'll own that, but in a fun way. But in reality, we have been the ones that been neglected. That has been our past. I've been to a lot of meetings where you guys say, hey, we're doing a public community meetings. I think we all have. And one of the things that I notice is most of the time the county talks at us. Today, what's happening right now is a little different. And I'm noticing that. I want to acknowledge that with you right now. You're not talking at us. You had some talking at points, but that just comes from a generic form, but you're talking with us. And that's why I asked you where you live. That's why I asked you to share a little bit about your information. That's important to us. So before I open the floor up to everyone else, I just want to make sure I had all my notes, areas. You talked about permit fees. And if an oak tree falls in any of our yards, and I don't think any of us really have any oak trees here, maybe some scrub oak or something like that, some junipers, a couple Joshua trees. If something falls and it's a hazard, y'all never gonna even know about it. We already took care of it before it was high noon. But let's just say we want to follow the rules. Like, what does an emergency permit process look like to get a tree? Because the reason why I ask is we all don't have great internet service. So we got to go online and fill out this form. We're adding stress to people's lives. And now people get more frustrated with you. Can you explain how, like you said, it's simple. What does that mean, simple?
Yeah, so that is specific to oak trees, because it's a process that is administered by the forestry division of the fire department. It's a matter of calling them, saying you have a hazardous tree, they send a forester out, they look at it, they determine that it is posting a hazard, they will issue the permit, relatively soon, like if it's either on site the next day after they're able to write it.
And then one of my last question was brought up by a community member that has a really large property. And when you say 15,000 square foot of area, now I'm thinking that's one nice garage on top of my house, on top of other stuff. But I think I heard you say like that includes like graded area, like the hillside areas. Can you refine or just go back into that a little bit for me? What those limitations are, like, because I'm trying to understand, is it my house footprint or is it everything that I want to do to my yard? Because I live in a small yard, right? And I don't have 15,000 square feet, but I'm gonna use a lot of my property for everything. Now, if I own 10 acres or 15 acres, 20 acres, which a lot of us do, we would like to be able to have a gigantic shop without any extra red tape. So I think that's something that a lot of people are concerned about. How about we just make a rule saying these are our ideas that we don't do and disturb these areas? But that doesn't mean you're gonna pay CUPs and all that heavy stuff. I don't understand that part.
Yeah, so when you talk about a large property, how large are we talking about?
Well, I'm thinking,
I've got 6 acres.
he's got 6 acres. I mean, but 15,000 square feet, I mean,
Yeah, yeah, and certainly we want the feedback on the numbers as well too. Right now, your CSD requires CUP
mhm,
for disturbances and removal of vegetation
we do.
over 3,000 square feet. You require a 1-year CUP for removal of vegetation over 25,000 square feet. So there is some alignment. Certainly the numbers are different. I acknowledge that. But I think there's some core principles that are very aligned between the CSD and the SCA, because it does support the overall character and the lifestyle. So when we talk about the specifics and scenarios, there are a lot of scenarios that we can go through. You know, we could be here all night with a soda pop on the porch talking about those different scenarios. And we certainly encourage all of us property owners to come and talk to us informally through these phone calls, through these virtual counseling sessions. But yeah, it is 15,000 square feet of BSA. Again, if they're starting new, it's just a vacant parcel, starting fresh, raw land, you haven't done anything at all. So it's the footprint, the building pad footprint. It's the portion if your driveway is longer than 300 feet. There are graded areas. If you're closer up into the Juniper Hills area where you start to get more of the terrain as opposed to the flower portion of Pearblossom, any areas that are graded that have resources would count towards that.
I think this might have a question.
If you need to grade for the septic system, yes.
We gotta put in a drainage, right?
Yeah, there's usually, oftentimes depending on the design, there's a leach field
Yeah.
associated with the septic system.
So the square footage of the leach field, that would be included.
It would be if you are going to disturb or remove that vegetation. What we've seen in other areas is sometimes there isn't removal of vegetation. We've seen different designs. But yes, it would count towards that, and if that's part of the feedback, the specific feedback that you want us to consider, whether it doesn't count towards the BSA, it does, we welcome it.
So I guess counting slopes and driveways and stuff like that just doesn't make no sense to us. Because some of us have a semi truck or a big truck, right? We have horse trailers, ATV trailers. I own 4 trailers and I only have an acre of land, but I own 4 trailers because of all the different things that I do. I think the county, unless you're being forced by the state, I think the county needs to make sure that they reevaluate that part. Because if someone wants a building and they want a building of a certain size, they should be able to do that, and they shouldn't have to pull a CUP for a slope. It just doesn't make no sense. Now, now you said our system's kind of aligned. Now, for our community, Pearblossom specifically in our CSD, we've already came up with a formula. That works for us. And our whole thing was about self-preservation. We wanted really to teach people how to live with the desert. So one of my last things I just realized I missed is if we really want to preserve our community's natural resources, the people ain't here are the problem. It's obviously you guys, I've identified it as the new builders. And you're absolutely right. Because right now we have an influx of people moving in from LA and they're just driving out here and plowing land, doing whatever they want. They don't even know what a CSD or any county rules are. I got 200 parcels in my town right now unpermitted. It's a lot. So I'm just getting to, there's too much stuff here, so I'm just gonna open it up to the floor. Anyone else on the floor have some questions?
Well, how is the 15,000 split number? Where did that come from?
So in areas that we have resource protection, they started and capped at 10,000 other parts of the county. Given the uses that are in the Antelope Valley that need a lot more space, we have that to 15,000. And in recognition of that extra space that is needed. Again, feedback is requested on that to understand whether or not that fits. And for some communities in the Antelope Valley, that does work. So we're looking for that feedback, but in other parts of the county, it does also cap it to the max, which is also.
It's not based on biodiversity, grants or anything. Like, yeah, you guys can look at it. So that's a number.
So oftentimes it also depends on the typical uses that we observe in the county. A lot of them are single family residences with a garage and then an extension building for various other uses or for animal keeping purposes. So it really depends on the community. But given also the cost of building nowadays and what the average home size is, taking all of those factors into consideration, the proposal at this time is 15,000.
And it was 20,000 before, right?
It was. It was.
So we reduced it 5,000 square feet.
It was.
So I'd like to make a suggestion that it goes back up to the 20,000 so it could reflect what our history was.
Yeah, I have another question. So there are existing SEAs, right? So have the restrictions, have they changed? Are they being changed in those existing SEAs?
So as part of this proposal, currently under the SCA program, right now, I mean, without any sort of new proposal, the Antelope Valley as a whole does have a wholesale exception for development of single family residences. So that just means, you know, there's any sort of additional review, you come in, you do the site plan review process, there are many
Look at the
restrictions.
map, there are areas that are already SEAs.
Yes.
So the regulations change within those existing SEAs?
Yes, so that's what I was trying to get at. So right now, there's that exemption in place, but as a part of this proposal, that exemption is being proposed to be removed. So that when a project comes in, it does go through either that ministerial route that I described or the discretionary. It isn't just an exemption. That exemption often situation is being proposed to be removed as.
So basically, all of these restrictions kick in now. Where they did.
Right, right.
So could we openly state that we don't want, we would actually like that exemption back?
Okay.
That's a hard, yeah, give us back our exemption.
Particularly for us, I feel like the CSDs and the vegetation requirements that we have on in place do represent the community, and it does allow for what do you call it, for the SCA to still exist as an overlay, but not when you're stripping away at what's already existing. Sounds like we ideally would want, and this is like to any existing residences to be exempted from this, but obviously that's not sure how that's gonna go.
I do have a clarifying question for you. Is that suggestion relative to each of the CSD areas or even outside of CSD areas? Just irrespective, you're suggesting that the exemption apply wholesale across the whole.
Well, I think the areas in Llano don't have any representation, so, I mean, truthfully, I think this should go to a vote to the people, but I think the exemption should be exactly how it was. We already identified the SCAs in this yellow area. To me, those are actually really significant areas, these yellow areas. I was actually in 100% support of SEAs. My brother came up to me, he's like, have you heard about this SCA stuff? I'm like, yeah, it's cool, they're protecting the rivers and stuff. And he goes, no, they drew circles around all our properties. We all agree, these are okay. What we're a little more concerned is all this that got added. So yeah, we would like that exemption to be not taken away.
I noted that.
And
It's also recognized that the exemption wasn't just for single family residences, it was also for animal keeping uses and associated. So I would recommend if you're gonna make that request, that you not just ask if you see SFR exemption, but.
That's an emphatic.
There's an old window, sir. That's an old window, man. Careful.
Guillotine in disguise.
Yeah, okay, well, just like Jackie said, that, thank you for,
Culture. Livestock. Wait till everyone else is done, but you have one other thing that I.
okay.
I have sort of a related question. Obviously, we had SEAs and protection in place, and I was protecting things, and now we're gonna ramp it up more. What's the driver? Is there like studies that say, hey, look, all these species are going away, we have problems, we need to do something about it? I haven't seen any of that data. Have you guys, do you have an explanation of why we need this?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the impetuses for the Western Joshua Tree Conservation Act is exactly what you're describing, that there have been extensive studies that have been conducted, largely accepted by the state. And we're seeing observations of juniper, Western Joshua trees in higher elevations than they existed before. So that's just one example of that. But collectively, I know we've.
So they're going down, but is there evidence to say that it's the level of development that's happening here, protections we thought had more protections than we better? Is there that protection wrong? Sorry.
Yeah, no, not at all, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, when you talk about the resources, it isn't necessarily just about the individual observations on specific properties. It's really the totality of the region. And I know that's, difficult to just think about because we're like, well, it's affecting my particular property, so I have a Joshua tree on it, yes or no. But it's the ability of these resources to be able to move, because they have constrictions. If that availability is not there, there is nowhere for it to go. So that's the part of that process.
Yeah, to that point, I've read your analysis that was done by the technical study that Chris referred to earlier. I think you called it the TAC, the technical study.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sub area 3E, it says this expansion covers more of the full extent of Big Rock Wash, western edge, and connects this area east to west with another major drainage in the East Mandela Valley, Little Rock Wash. And it says centered on the community of Pearblossom, but excluding developed areas. This takes a large intact stance of Joshua Tree woodland and other desert edge habitats, and includes a jackrabbit flat. I don't know this community as well as I know my community, but I was looking at the map and I saw areas that were omitted that were untouched, and I saw areas that were included that are fully farmed. And according to what Chris said, it's around areas that are prior farmed areas, which is not the large intact stands of Joshua trees. So I think that I'm concerned that there's a little bit of discrepancy between what this community understands as what is in the map, new map, expanded area, versus what your technical expert said the purpose is of this, and I'll give you guys this. So I'm really concerned about that because I don't know your community, but like Chris says, it's not driving a lot of private farm areas. That's not consistent with what they're saying, why they're expanding this. And I saw that it was grabbing all of the Valdermo Ranch area in the PRTC, which I can't tell if that's in Pearblossom or in, Juniper Hills. I don't know where you found it.
All kind of together.
Yeah, that's a working ranch, right? I mean, it's,
Yeah, there's farming going on.
it is. So that's my concern. Everyone else is done. I have one last thing.
Go ahead, take your time, Jackie.
It's important for all of you to recognize and realize and understand that all of this is going to be done pursuant to an adopted implementation guideline. And it's not on the CNR website, it's on a different website, and I'll send you the link to it when I get back home. But that guidelines sets forth how they are already implementing the SCA and therefore how they implement it in the expanded area. And it's, among other things, there is a table 2, if you're able to keep your development under 15,000 square feet, you get a ministerial review. Except after you still have to hire a biologist to do the biological constraints analysis and have your property mapped out. This is category 2, category 3, category 4, and you still have to, and, you know, I think if you go over the 15,000, so correct me if it's wrong. You have to set aside a 1-to-1 ratio at the very least, and in some cases 2-to-1 for some of these species. And the preference that the county has is you give that land granted to a conservation organization. So it's not just you're proposing or promising to leave it in perpetuity untouched. The expectation is, and the PRTC guidelines, that you grant it to like MRCA or the desert rock, there's the desert organizations that are, you know, and that, I think it's important. I don't think a lot of people realize this, that it isn't just this ordinance. You gotta read the guidelines, because that's how they're going to implement. And at the very most, unless you have fully disturbed property or your property is completely invaded with non-natives, you're going to be what they call category 2 or higher. And at the very most you can do is develop half your property. So if you develop half your property, the other half goes to the.
Jackie, I am going to stop you because this was stated at the Acton Town Council and you spoke to Iris afterwards and there was a correction made. And
She agreed with me.
hold on. But to assume that a property has, so yes, there are different categories of resources depending on whether it's federally listed, protected by the federal government, protected by the state, or resources that we've identified that are unique and local to Los Angeles County. So they're given different categories in terms of what that mitigation would look like, would require. It isn't off the bat 50% of their property, but mitigation, depending on what that space is like Jackie said, either 1-to-1. So if you're impacting 5,000 square feet of that particular resource and it requires a 1-to-1, then yes, that request would be a 5,000 square foot mitigation area to account for the impact to that resource. If it's something that is listed federally or state that has a higher ratio, then yes, that would increase as well too.
Okay, Iris and I talked. She looked at table 2 and she agreed with everything I said. What she said is, Jackie, we're not making you give up half your land. We're making you give up the equal amount that you're going to impact or destroy or whatever.
And those are two different statements. Half of your land versus equal to what you're disturbing are different numbers.
You need to listen very carefully to what I said. I said, at most, the most you can use of your property, if you're category 2, is half your property. So if you buy 2 acres and you want to farm 2 acres, you can only farm 1 acre. That is what I said. The very most you can use, because it is a 1-to-1 ratio that's in table 2. I was very careful with what I said. I do not misrepresent what this SCA ordinance and the guidelines say. But it is true with the 1-to-1 set aside, the most you are allowed to disturb if you have category 2, the very most you can disturb, you have to preserve the rest, is half the property.
And so to explain as well for the categories, since we're diving a little deeper in the technicalities of it, there are 5 resource categories that range from 1 to 5. 1 being the most protected, that includes endangered species, and then it goes down to disturbed areas of the property. So when we talk about two, it's likely that there is a protected species on site and of rare resources as well too. And Jackie, I'm happy to dive further into those details of the implementation ordinance, but also this information about mitigation is in the ordinance right now under the development standards section. So under the ministerial SCA review, under development standards, you'll see a section about mitigation.
Except the definition of what constitutes category 4, 3, and 2, and 1 is in the guidelines.
Yes,
And I'm going to read to you what category 2 is, right? Because this is, I'm just trying to get there, so just a second.
I think one point is, not just that you might have a protected species, a biologist could look at your land, not see the species, maybe no signs of it, and just say, you know, that species could live here, so it needs protection.
Yeah.
So, okay.
with a biological inventory, that's usually not how they always about the inventory. The inventory is to demonstrate evidence of that. So it's not just, oh, they might, it's, they're looking for that evidence of that species, whether they either developed habitat or if it's a vacated habitat, that same species might occur.
So this would be like an inspection per parcel, per project.
It's that pre-application council, yes.
Okay,
Hire biologists.
That you pay for.
I think that should be something that's done up front before any land sells to an individual or home sold to an individual. And anyone who already owns that property before something like this gets put into place is grandfathered in and it doesn't apply. Because these are things that a homeowner, I mean, especially, you know, somebody who's going to purchase land or a home should know up front, and that should already be done. Or know that they have to pay for that before the sale is final. Because it's very unfair.
and we've actually said that about other things too, like when people buy a house out here, they don't know about a CSD. They don't know about dark skies. They don't know about the economic opportunity areas. We don't know about any of this.
It should be a requirement
Yeah.
given.
A long time ago, we talked to the bar about disclosures about SCAs, CSDs, various other zoning components. And I think for a while I saw a disclosure form that talked about the SCAs, it was acknowledging it. So the buyer
If
sees
you're in one.
the statement, exactly. So you're only given that if you're in one, or that one is checked off. I don't know if they've made other improvements to that disclaimer disclosure.
Not as of 10 years ago.
But I don't know if all of the real estate agents operate this way either. But it is regulated by the Department of Real Estate from the state. Usually real estate agents are directed to direct the buyer to do their due diligence by talking to the local agency. It isn't the due diligence of the real estate agent to provide the disclosure of the details of the disclosure.
Okay,
I found category 4.
okay, cat 4, here we go.
Where it represents the more common natural communities that occur within the county, as well as certain plant species with distribution in the state. They're all categories that are considered inherently secure. That's the term they use. So not endangered. They're GS, G4, and S4, and G5 and S5. So it's just basically untouched space or not overrun with invasives, but it has nothing particular. That's what's in the categories 3, 4, and 5.
And you just read off 4, right now 2.
No, category 2. It's apparently secure. This category represents the more common natural communities that occur within the county. So it's nothing endangered, nothing threatened, nothing protected. It's just mostly untouched land.
I will provide you that specific language for each of the categories for the council's review for each of those resource categories.
Thank you. We've been on this about an hour. Do we have anyone else has any questions or concerns or comments? I would like to ask everybody in this room. You don't have to answer. You can just raise your hand if you like. Who supports this? Can you make a note of that? Not one person in our meeting raised their hand.
Things that we did with such a rails as well.
It's important to us. That's how we talk, so.
Appreciate, I acknowledge, the lack of hands in response to your question that there is support.
You're very awesome. I appreciate your time and your effort coming out. You don't have an easy job. Most people try to shoot and kill the messenger because they're pissed off at the person who's making them deliver it. So we're not mad at you. I hope you didn't take anything personal. This is our livelihood.
This is her plan.
But she's being made to do this. And when so now that you have had our feedback, you've had Juniper Hills feedback. One thing that I haven't got from the county yet is our tour. Now, that's super important. The tour. I said tour. Did you got that? Tour. We haven't got our tour. And we like to take you guys on tours way before drafts are ever written. So I'm gonna re-invite you and your team to come out to Pearblossom. I'll team up. Sergio already said he'd team up with me. We'll show you the foothills of Little Rock. I know I got some Juniper Hills folks in here, and we'll just show you this little east side. I'd like you to go back and challenge the data that was presented to you. That is important. And I think the county should go back and sue these people for making you guys present despicable data.
Yeah.
You should not be proud that after we pointed this out, you should be going back and telling those people, man, them rural folks chewed us up because your data didn't have 1 point on any streets in their town. Period. Like, that means a lot to us if you can go back. Can I get that commitment from you?
We will certainly take all of this feedback back and take a look at that.
Thank you.
You know, there's one other thing, I said, you take a look at their analysis, we have page 78, changes your section, but it says these are the justifications. Baruch, Howell, Mojave Ground School, which is important. In the Joshua Tree Woodland, right? The Conch Rasher, the high rare plant riches toward the mountains, okay, so toward the mountains, okay? Some areas nearly entirely roadless, okay? With large undisturbed soils, right? Doesn't necessarily have to be rare on it. And desert montane transitional habitat with wildlife movement. I'm concerned because it looks like a lot of the parcels and it looks don't necessarily meet these categories. Like there are areas that are not roadless. There are areas that are nowhere near the foothills. So while each of these criteria might apply to a small part of the expansion goes well beyond, I think, those criteria established. But again, I don't know.
And I actually will support what you just said, and I'll give you a perfect example. So the SCA on the little map, right? And it kind of just missed this little middle section of town, but it has basically surrounded the whole Pearblossom and going to other areas. This SCA has encompassed our entire commercial, our future commercial area. And that area has already been disturbed by the California State Water Project. And it's all 100% disturbed land. There's no Joshua trees over there. There's only creosote bushes, sagebrush, a lot of that weird plant Caltrans always brings around, some invasive species. That's there. And all the original olive trees from the farms over 100 years ago are still out there. And you guys circled that. So that's why I really challenged the data, because that makes zero sense. That makes zero sense.
Well, you brought up the creosote bushes, so that it certainly fits into that category 4 of local resources. It may not be a listed species, but it is local in this area as well too. And Chris, you know, we can continue this conversation. This isn't a one and done. It's not a third and done either.
We would actually like to invite you back. Maybe we could have more of a workshop style meeting instead of a formal one. I would encourage that to happen, and we could probably do some of that soon, but if we had a tour visit, we could knock out a lot of it right here.
Interestingly, I used to give tours to the employees of the AD to make sure they are well informed about what a rural area looks like.
Cool. I'm curious to see what you know and what we could share and bingo back and forth. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.